Yes.
Just that the reason that our policy department is advocating for commissions like this one is because the current process is insufficient, and when we come across misconduct, it's because of our post-conviction cases, and we usually find it in discovery, post-conviction, and then there are not sufficient ways to deal with that. We have one case where a prosecutor was subjected to criminal charges, but a more efficient way, we think, would be an ethical commission to review those issues.
Can I add something?
I would,
Yes. Yes, Judge.
Perry, I understand your questions and your need to have a clarification of whether or not the current system works. I would just add that the Supreme Court Appellate Division, all of the departments are the ones that promulgate the rules for attorney disciplinary matters, and that as of July 1st, coming up this year, that those rules have been changed and modified, and that the court system has decided to go to a more uniform system of all four departments that do have these either disciplinary grievance or committees of professional standards. Hello? I'm sorry. I understand your need for clarification of the current system and as far as whether or not it works, and you're asking if there are any rules. But I can tell you that as of January 1st of this year, the Supreme Court Appellate Division, all departments, there are 4 departments that have these either disciplinary grievance or committee on professional standards. They're called different things in each department. That the rules for attorney disciplinary matters have been modified and or changed, and are going to take effect as of July 1st of this year. And that the court system has determined, after much discussion and study, that there needs to be more uniformity between all 4 of the departments. And they worked very hard on that, and as of July 1st, those new rules are coming out. I would suggest, and I could forward to you, just like I'm going to forward to you some of the cases that I cited, this section on Part 1240, the rules for attorney disciplinary matters, so you can see exactly what the rules are and what jurisdiction and authority they work under.
Assemblyman Perry, the answer is not uniform rules. You can make those rules as uniform as you want, and it's not going to change the issue of prosecutorial misconduct. The same rules that will come out in July preserve the system. It allows the DA, upon a complaint by a lawyer or a citizen, to go into a closed-door proceeding with counsel, not be challenged, tell a story to the grievance committee that goes unchallenged except for questions largely by people who are not well versed in the criminal law.
Well, the same thing happens under the Judicial Commission.
That is how prosecutorial conduct continues.
Well, it's Judicial Commission.
Assistance of counsel. Are we going to expand this commission to include ineffective assistance of counsel?
Of defense attorneys?
Excuse me a minute. Excuse me.
There are 3 players in the criminal justice system.
Yes, and one player happens to be the judges, and there's a Judicial Conduct Commission.
Yeah, but
the other,
Senator,
excuse me,
but Senator,
excuse me. The other player is the defendant. The other player is the defense counsel.
Yes.
Okay. If there's inefficient assistance of counsel, they can be disciplined under the procedures that you think are so wonderful, the grievance committee.
But there's privacy there too. Are you going to create a special section to allow for that to occur?
And also the Judicial Commission also is private. That is not totally public. I was a judge for 16 years. They have judges that complaints have been filed against them and they never knew about it.
The procedure that this...
It's the same thing.
That's my point. That's why we use the Judicial Conduct Commission as the exact duplicate of this bill. So the concerns about, what you're concerned about, the judges were concerned about in the 1970s when this thing first started out. And no one seems to complain about it right now. I haven't heard any complaints about Judicial Conduct Commission like we hear with everyone else. Before we get into a battle here, it's been very civil up to this point in time. Before we get into a free-for-all, I just want to recognize Senator Bonasek. He wanted to make a comment, Senator Boyle, and then we'll see where we are at that point.
Yeah, it's good.
First of all, thank you all for being here. I apologize that I didn't hear the whole hearing.
Got it.
Thank you, Phil. I apologize, we didn't hear the whole hearing, but we had multiple things going on. There's a lot of stress today in the whole judicial system. The economy, breakdowns in family, money issues, and it all is in your lap. We feel the stress, you feel the stress. And so I appreciate that. The anxiety is harder. Everybody's life is harder. I'm a former assistant DA. To me, the assistant DAs, honorable profession, the good guys. And I'm thinking, if I vote for this legislation, am I giving defendants another tool in their toolbox to delay justice, to go after the good guys? That's the question, I think, in my mind. And I've spoken to another senator who was a prosecutor also. And then I see trends happening nationally and at the state level. Nationally, our Justice Department does things, and I'm not talking only about New York, that targets political enemies. And that's disturbing to me because they're the good guys. I see DAs that have blind ambition, that want to go up a ladder. That scares me. And it's not the dumb ones, it's the very smart ones that we have to worry about. And I don't say, I think the lion's share of the DAs do a great job. I do. And that very small segment that intentionally commits prosecutorial misconduct with malice, oh, I would love to put them on the side and nail them.
So would we.
Because it makes it hard for everybody in this room.
So would we.
And I don't know how we get at that without hurting the good guys, okay? I just want to say, I give Senator DeFrancisco a lot of courage for him to go here, because this is a sledgehammer. It's a sledgehammer against the district attorneys, and maybe they don't, I think the lion's share of them shouldn't get hit in the head with it. But at the same time, I do believe there is a trend that's getting more dangerous, because I think the most dangerous person in the world is a DA that can indict a ham sandwich. It was always that way. Always that way. And how do we get at them? My last point, you brought in another dimension as a result of this discussion. I think it behooves the DAs and the defense attorneys to get together and come up with a plan that makes the system more efficiently with a timeline, and get it to me. I'm not talking about prosecutor misconduct right now. I'm talking about delays, not having a word at the grievance hearing, not hearing. That's not all right. That's wrong. So whatever we can do in our power to correct that, I'm looking to get at the bad apples. And I think they're a minority, but they're existing, and I think they're growing because of social media. And all I see DAs now out more than politicians taking pictures at events that have nothing to do with judicial proceedings. So it's a different, for some of them, they're different animals. Not the guy that's devoted his life, loves the business, tries to be fair, and always do the right thing. I don't worry about those people. I worry about the new breed, the blind ambition breed. And they're out there, and I think they're growing. Okay? So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm just talking of observations and my instincts. And, we'll deliberate very carefully on this stuff because we don't want to hurt the good guys, but we sure as heck want to hit the bad guys with the sledgehammer.
Thank you, Chairman. I unfortunately have to run to another hearing, but I did want to thank Senator DeFrancisco and Chairman Lenthal and my colleagues, all the witnesses, and particularly the exonerees for testifying. I think some of the arguments that were made today were powerful, but what struck me perhaps was the gentleman from Queens, Mr. Masters. I think you made an argument to me that actually was in favor of a commission, because you talked about this case. I know, Mr. Stewart, I guess, was the case, and you said, well, we loved his story, he was a good guy, and that's the reason, because the internal politics of your office said, let him stay. Maybe I'm sure he wasn't doing it I don't think he was doing it on purpose, but the fact that you guys liked him. So to have an outside independent body look at situations like that is a strong argument to me. In terms of the need, we talked about in the 70s, the Judicial Conduct Commission came about as part of cases and popular. Well, I can tell you right now in popular culture and the cases in this country, there's a movement for prosecutorial misconduct commission. I mean, whether it's communities of color, obviously they do not trust the prosecution. Making a murderer didn't happen in New York, but everybody's seen it here, I assume. If you haven't, I suggest you do. And the quote by the defense attorney in that documentary, he did not, in his long defense attorney career, he said, prosecutors do not frame innocent people generally. They find people they think are guilty, and then they do bad things. And I think a lot of American culture feels that way as well. So because of those things and because of what's going on in Suffolk County and St. Lawrence and other areas, I think the time has come for that. But I thank you very much for the information. It was great, and we look forward to working with you as we move forward with this possible legislation.
First of all, I'm going to disagree with my colleague, John Bonasek. This bill is not, nor was it ever intended to be a sledgehammer against prosecutors. Never. That has never occurred to me. The fact of the matter is, in the military, I prosecuted cases for about a year and then was transferred out, did defense work. I was in the prosecutor's office in Onondaga County when Bill Fitzpatrick was a clerk, who's revered in prosecutorial circles. And then I did defense work. I tried 2 murder cases for defense. I know the system, and I know what happens and what doesn't happen. I also know that prosecutors have the most power of anybody. A mere accusation, as we're hearing from the Rain case in St. Lawrence, it's just one of many, that a mere accusation of misconduct and a potential criminal investigation ruins the person, okay? So what do you do about it? Do you just continue on with what's going on now? Well, there's no remedy. I don't care who says, the grievance committee, it's nonsense. There's no prosecutor that I know of that any consequences whatsoever has ever happened, and especially when you hear the victims, what's happened to them on the other side. So that I want to make clear. Number 2, so what's the remedy? We're not going to change all the laws and change human behavior. There's going to be good and bad legislators, good and bad prosecutors, good and bad defense counsels. The fact of the matter is you got to find a model that has been a reasonable model that's fair for both sides. And I was around in the 70s when this Judicial Commission came up. You would think the world was going to end and judges were going to be brought before a public display and humiliated. The fact of the matter is what's happened over time is there are judges who are made complaints against that are exonerated and shown that in the initial process, as Mr. Tembekshi had said, the initial process, just they get rid of the file because they know it's ridiculous. Or it goes on, and I really believe that the most serious situations are dealt with, unlike the grievance committee. So, rather than a sledgehammer, this is the model that Assemblyman Perry and I came up with that we thought would be fair, because we've got something that showed it was fair in the past, and it's working quite well now. Now, many people here hate it. Others think it's the best thing that's ever happened. It's probably somewhere in the middle. Now, procedurally, where is it going to go? We've got 5 days after today, or 4 days after today, for the bill to get to the floor. Whether it does or not, I don't know. It got to the floor in both houses last year. It never came up for a vote. We're giving our opinion and our solution. We still need the votes in order to make it happen. But I'm going to try to convince people that this is a good remedy where none exists right now to try to make it happen. And if you disagree with me, God bless you. But the fact of the matter is that's where I'm going. And you obviously can lobby other legislators and see where they stand. But that's basically where I stand. And we'll see what develops between now and the end of session. Anything else?
Yes.
Okay.
Since we're doing some soul searching, let me do some of my own. First of all, I started out my working life as a prosecutor, as an assistant DA in Brooklyn, and I loved that job. It was one of the best jobs I ever had. Unfortunately, some other calling got me here. Now we're not only contemplating this bill, but we're contemplating doing some measures for public officials like myself, like the senators and the assemblymen on this panel, because of the bad things that some folks have done in the legislature. We don't like doing it. We don't like being tarred with the same brush as our brothers and sisters who have gone before us and broken the law. But unfortunately, we have to deal with it. So it's not as though we're not considering action for ourselves. We're probably not going to be able to leave Albany this year without passing some meaningful legislation on ethics reform of some type or another. So I say that only to reinforce the fact that I'm not a sponsor of this bill. But I think the model that, well, I'm not the major sponsor of the bill, let me just say that. My name is on the bill because I believe in it, obviously, or I wouldn't be here today. Because I think that the time is right for us to take some action, just like Senator DeFrancisco said, that I believe is fair and reasonable, so that there can be some, I would have liked to ask Mr. Tebekian some more questions about that so that we could get to the heart of the matter, and that is how the commission would operate and what shortcomings he would see in the process for DAs or assistant DAs who come before him. But that's for another hearing, because I doubt whether or not we'll have time to do this bill. I mean, Mr. DeFrancisco and Mr. Perry are optimistic, but we have a lot to get done, and I'm sure that there's enough political will against the bill that might prevail, and that's unfortunate. But I dare say we will get to it. If it's not this year, we will get to it next year, I hope. And we want to, during that time, we want to dialogue with you so that we can, if we come to a resolution on this, we can work together in developing it, just like we developed the Commission on Judicial Conduct.
Now you got me speaking up. Well, you're not speaking up because you're not a member of the group that's been asked to speak. Go ahead.
Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. The power of the district attorney is awesome. I don't know if you can properly measure how awesome that is. And any one of us that, especially in the community that I represent, African American community, where young men and young women face a prosecutor every day, thousands and thousands of times, and they have to make decisions and think about offers that are put to them by prosecutors, sometimes fair, a lot of times unfair, sometimes with reason, sometimes absolutely no reason at all that would prevail in a trial. Prosecutors are aware of this, but they make the offers anyway to reduce their calendar of cases. And these youngsters face a system that is just rigged against I go through that with my own family. And I know, as a matter of fact, that this awesome power has to be checked something. There has to be some accountability. And it's really important to me. And I happen to have the privilege of being the chair of the board. And I do.
Good. Yeah.
I happen to be the chair of the Black Puerto Rican Hispanic Caucasian Legislative Caucus. This bill is a priority on our list. We're doing everything to get it passed in the Assembly this year, before we leave. I'm committed to that. I'm also very committed to working with the district attorneys. I've done work with district attorneys over my tenure, and I've worked with district attorneys in all the boroughs in the city of New York. District Attorney Brown in Queens does a fine job. We have outstanding work by our district attorney. So this is not a sledgehammer against district attorneys. None of us are biased or intend to do anything to harm the office of the district attorney. But we are concerned with the trust in the criminal justice system from the people that we represent here. And that's our motivation. That's why we're pushing this. And it will help the office of the district attorneys if there is trust in the system, so that people will have confidence in the work that you all do as the office that represents the people in all of these cases. Thank you.
And thank you all for coming. I know everyone has something else they want to say. If you want to say it, if you want to write to Assemblyman Perry and myself, so we'll have that information, I'd be more than happy to accept it. But we got to stop now because we have to go to conference, then session. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.